hope you didn't miss us too much, because the Wednesday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast dives deep back into all of the fantasy hockey news that you need. And we're breaking down the top centermen in the fantasy game, 10 through 6. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's drop the puck already, shall we? What is going on, everybody, and welcome back inside the lab to the latest episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, your daily source for fantasy hockey news. Shout out to the everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. We wouldn't be here without everyone's support, and we can't wait to drop the puck on the upcoming season. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today and get 20% off your first purchase. Steele, the centerman, we're looking at him. We've been breaking down every single position. Now we hit the middle of the ice, and these are obviously some of the most important players to every single team's success. However, I know you and I have a little bit of a differing of opinions on how our top list shake out, although I don't know if you think I'm going to be as ready and aligned with you on today's episode as I might be. However, we got to push forward. Fantasy drafts are upon us. We had our most recent mock draft Monday episode. Listener League details dropped. Over to you, my friend. We're starting off 10 through 6 in the best centerman in the fantasy game. I'm intrigued to who you have on your list. Do you have some honorable mentions, perhaps? Over to you, though. Who you looking at? We're looking at the best centerman in the fantasy realm.
I do have a couple of honorable mentions, and look, you and I might get into it over the next couple of episodes because I read your Dauber Hockey Top 10 Center of Attention. Hey, great article, by the way. Great writing from Flip Livingstone over there, but we're going to get into it for sure on this Top 10 Centers projection for fantasy
You might be
hockey.
surprised.
Okay, maybe you switched it up on me a little bit, but based off the Top 10 center position, Top 10 article for centers that you wrote for Dauber Hockey. Look, my honorable mentions. I got to get off to it right now. Honorable mentions, Aleksander Barkov and Jack Eichel. Those are my two honorable mentions. They don't make the top 10 list, and for specific reasons. Aleksander Barkov is a top center in this league. He's in the Selke conversation all the time, but sometimes the ability in the National Hockey League doesn't transfer over quite into a top 10 role in the fantasy hockey realm. For me, he's outside the top 10 for that reason. And I don't hate on you for having him in your top 10 if he's in your top 10. Secondly, Jack Eichel, for me, I love this player. The volume of shots that this player takes, the ability in the offensive zone that he shows us, the skill set that he brings to this game, it's undeniable. Jack Eichel is undeniably one of my favorite hockey players to watch. The injury concern is why he does not make the top 10 list. He does everything else great. He's a 30 goal scorer in this league. I know he's only done it twice in his NHL career, but he hasn't played more than 68 games since 2018. It's been a long time. He hasn't played a full season in the National Hockey League in his entire career. You have to go back to his rookie season for the most amount of games played that Jack Eichel's played with 81 games. So for me, the injury concern is a massive key as to why he's outside the top 10, but he's an honorable mention. He's 11. He's 12 right there with Aleksander Barkov. Number 10, though, I'll get to this quick. And I would be very surprised if he's not in your top 10. And based on your article, he wasn't. Elias Pettersson is the 10th best center in the National Hockey League, in the fantasy hockey realm. This guy's an absolute stud. He's been durable over the last 3 seasons. He's missed only 4 games in the last 3 seasons, 102 points the year prior, 89 points this last year, 3 consecutive years of 32 plus goals for Elias Pettersson. Maybe a little bit of a dip in the offensive realm of his game. But when we talked about the Vancouver Canucks top 5 targets for this season, He's right there projection-wise for me with JT Miller. 90 to 95 points is what I have him at. A little bit of a dip in the shot volume as well from 257 2 seasons ago to 207. But the shooting percentage is where I'm looking at for this player. 16.6 career average shooting percentage for Elias Pettersson. He's now bringing a physical aspect into his game. 125 hits last year, 68 blocks. I think he should be in the top 10. If he's not in the top 10, I'd be very surprised if he's not there. For me, Elias Pettersson, he's the 10th best center fantasy-wise.
This perhaps might be the most interesting top anything ranking that you and I have done, because I would like to come on here and say, Steele, you've changed your tune a little bit on players like Elias Pettersson here, because I
told you it would take 5 seasons to be a superstar. It would take 5 seasons.
That's actually true. Look, I just already appreciate this breakdown, because if there's anything to be said about what we take a look at on the next 2 episodes worth of Centerman, is we're not going to be that far off. And we are going to have the top 11, 12, 13 guys at this position that you should be drafting. Let me get my honorable mention off. And I don't think actually still you're going to be ready for my top 10 list. And I'm even more excited for it. Right now, Eichel does get honorable mention. I appreciate where you're coming from. I'm worried about the Vegas Golden Knights. I'll get that off my chest. First and foremost, I can't really put my finger on it, but some of the departures, the Logan Thompson security blanket in the cage, Aiden Hill's inability to stay healthy, and his basically not much of a track record other than the heater he went on in the playoffs. I'm not going to get into the Golden Knights. Elias Pettersson does make honorable mention. So we're not too far off here. And I got to throw some love at Connor Bedard. And I understand that this is a
100%.
first-year player. I understand that he doesn't fill out the peripherals. But from what I saw from this kid, Steele, if we run the tape back and then we play this episode at this time next season, he is already going to probably be in the top 10 centermen in the league on a list of this nature. That's how good he is. So those are my honorable mentions. Sliding in at 10, a player that I love a lot in Sebastian Aho. Sebastian Aho's main concern for me, coming off of 89 points, a career best, not too many things to be worried about, you'd say, is where the Carolina Hurricanes deploy Seth Jarvis. And that weakness up the middle, Kotkaniemi, you mentioned it yourself, not being comfortable with them, having to rely on a guy in that spot. Maybe Seth Jarvis's ability to play up the middle, they have to break up that duo, and then I'm concerned a little bit about Aho's output. However, right now, considering Jarvis and him play together, I got Aho at the 10th spot for me, Steele. Elite offensive player and a really, really quality piece. Who do you got at 9? Let's keep it moving. I'm ready for more on this list. And I'll just say this, JT Miller does make my list, my friend. And I'll tell you why in a few minutes.
Absolutely love that, because I was worried because I saw he was on your honorable mention. So that's why I was saying,
and I'll explain. I'll explain
in this 2-part top 10 center for fantasy hockey. Look, I'll make this short and sweet. Sebastian Aho comes in at the number 9 position for me. He is absolutely undeniably a reincarnation. I know they're playing in the league right now, but he is one of the best two-way centermen in the league right now. He's right there with Aleksander Barkov for me. I know he's been in the Celtics conversation. He hasn't been as high in consideration, but he should have been a lot higher this last year. And I'm banking on this top line of Seth Jarvis and Andrei Svechnikov. Even if Martin Necas is in that right-wing position on the top line, I'm absolutely loving it as well. But I do believe it will be Seth Jarvis and Andrei Svechnikov. I'm banking on Svechnikov to be completely healthy going into the season. No injury concerns with that player. You know I like him a lot as well, too. Sebastian Aho is undeniably one of the greatest centermen. Not greatest centermen, but one of the great centermen young centermen in the league right now. Career high, 89 points, like you said. Another player that hasn't really been able to play a full 82 games since his rookie year, but 78 games, 75 games, 79 the last 3 seasons. He misses, maybe a handful of games here and there every single year. But again, the shooting percentage is where I'm looking at with this guy.
You've been loving that number lately.
Over 16.5 shooting percentage for Sebastian Aho over the last 3 seasons. His career average, 15.2. The shooting volume, he's been getting over 215 shots over the last 3 seasons as well. I think he can get a lot higher than that playing in that role that he plays in Carolina. He can get a lot more minutes. I think he can get over 20 minutes this upcoming season as well. He'll be 27 years old. And I think this player, again, if everything goes well and everything goes the way I see it does with this top line, Seth Jarvis absolutely rolling, being a sniper that he is, Svechnikov bringing the physicality, the Banger League beauty in him, and being able to stay healthy. I love that top line in Carolina. Sebastian Aho, 85, 90 points is where I'm having him at, and I have him as the 9th best centerman.
The Hurricanes lost some important pieces. Teravainen, Gensel, Pesce, your boy Brady Shea. But they bring in some other pieces. I believe Sean Walker is there now. Gostisbehere. They brought in some other, I'm not ready to give up on this Carolina Hurricanes team yet. Not even close, especially when you got Freddie and Kochetkov in the cage. This is also a team that, as much as I think we've pointed out, the offense might be a concern, and we will get to break. We'll get to the rest of our list in a second. They have actually been, Steele, one of the better overall offensive squads. Last year, 277 goals for. That was 8th best in the NHL. They were up there, I believe, as well. Let me toggle screens here. 2nd best power play in the league. Gensel, down the stretch, important for sure, but he wasn't there all year, and this team was getting it done all year. You can't count out this Carolina group. Don't count out the rest of the episode. We're going to keep bringing the fire at the center position, breaking down our favorite fantasy centerman. We'll go 5 through 1 on tomorrow's episode, and then we're headed out to, I believe, Steele, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're headed to the right wing, perhaps? Left wing?
Left wingers.
Hey, there we are.
There you go.
Left wing, baby. The one thing I do know, Steele, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today so you never have a stressful ticket buying experience for your next favorite event. Steele and I love using the Game Time app for all of our sporting event needs, but that's not the only thing. Game Time has you covered for comedy, theater, music, and everything in your local area. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. For your second listen, please go over and enjoy the Locked On NHL Podcast. They provide you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode. Hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Flip and I appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. Flip, over to you, my friend. Are you at the number 9 position? You're at the number 8 position.
I'm at the number 9 position, so let's get this out of the way because we always try and get you guys in here. 30 minutes, the news, the breakdowns, what you need. That's what Steele and I are about. We are all busy individuals. Ain't nobody got time for 2-hour episodes. However, number 9, JT Miller, Steele. Look, I know you're going to have him up higher on your list. I rethought this. I looked at my article from Dauber, and I'm not going to back away from the words I ever put on paper or the words I put on this show for that matter. But I do need to hold true to what you and I do on this podcast. And that article is much more of a points-based focus. You and I come on here and we talk about categorical, peripheral category coverage type players. And I can't come on here, especially after you know how much I love your takes and you as my co-host, and not back you up on one of your strongest stances that also have turned out true. JT Miller has put up back-to-back-to-back now stellar fantasy seasons covering every category that you basically want from a centerman. So it would have been a mistake on my part to come on here for a top 10 list at the center position and not have him. He might be higher on your list, but I hope you appreciate, for the sake of also just holding true to our show, that he comes in at number 9, and I appreciate that he could be higher on this list, but I like some of these players a little bit more. That's just me. JT Miller comes in at 9. I'll turn it over to you, my friend.
Well, I do appreciate that, Flip, and I absolutely love that he makes your top 10 list.
He has
if I am nitpicking though a little bit, doesn't matter what format you're playing, JT Miller is a top 10 centerman in the league. Hey, our boy Blake Creamer agreed on that one too. So I'm going to leave it with that over there. But look, I'm high on JT Miller, and I'll talk about him on tomorrow's episode.
Wow.
That's how high he is for me.
There we go.
At number 8, though, I think this guy might be one of the most underrated players to add to your team. He's so sneaky good. Braden Point at the number 8 position right now. He could be a little bit higher potentially on some other people's list.
Yep.
But Braden Point comes in at number 8 for me. He's been great over the last 2 seasons. He's only missed 1 game. He had some injury concern in that 3-year gap from 2019 to 2021. But over the last 2 seasons, he's been very durable. Again, back to the shooting percentage. A career 18.3 shooting percentage for Braden Point. The last 2 seasons, he's had 97 goals. Absolutely insane what he's able to do in different areas of the ice, in front of the net, in the slot position, behind the crease as well. He does it all for them. He's a playmaker. He's a goal scorer. 46 goals this last year, 51 the year prior. If it wasn't for the shortened seasons, he's a perennial 35, 40-plus goal scorer in the National Hockey League. That's how good he is. And he exceeds where he's at for his ADP. He's so good as a fantasy hockey player. 12 game-winning goals last season. He's great on the power play. Obviously, the Tampa Bay Lightning have one of the top power play units in the National Hockey League right now. He could be a little bit higher, but I do value some more players in that center position over him. Braden Point, a lot of shot volume. You're not going to get the blocks and the hits that you get from some of these other players, but offensive side of things, he's right there as one of the best in the league right now.
Steele, this player was taken 79th overall in the 3rd round of the 2014 NHL entry draft. Also kind of bizarre. The player taken ahead of him, which is also a massive slip, somebody you might know by the name of Ilya Sorokin. So both of those draft picks in that year, a little bit of a slip, but just intriguing considering how good this player is. And let's fast forward to this season and not take anything away from pieces that have been there before. Most recently, obviously, getting a look with Steven Stamkos, especially on that top power play unit. Jake Gensel's an upgrade. And now there's a wrinkle on that line, Steele, with Point and a guy named Kucherov coming off only the 5th triple-digit assist season in the history of the game we love so much. And Braden Point is higher up on this list for me. And that's just how much I'm reading into that trio. I'll talk about him in a couple of slots. I love that you have him here. Let me hit you with my guy at number 7. And at number 8, it's Aleksander Barkov. You talked about him a little bit. Did you say he doesn't make your list, I believe?
Yeah, he doesn't make the top 10 list. He is an honorable mention. Again, like when we it's mostly, again, when we're talking about, again, you wrote that article for, fantasy point formats. I get it. Completely understand it. I agree in that sense. When we talk about categorical, he doesn't make the top 10 for me, but he is an honorable mention alongside Jack Eichel.
Totally fair. Look, he was such a good piece in the playoffs for them. He is the first Finnish captain. I know all of those things don't play into the fantasy side of things. He is just that good of a player that I don't think he deserves to be any lower on this list. So I appreciate that you have him honorable mention. There's the injury factor that is obviously something that I know you pay a lot of attention to, and I respect that. He comes in at 8 for me. Aleksander Barkov was sensational in the playoffs last season. He had 80 points in 73 games. Yeah, the last couple of years, 68 games, 67 games. A concern there in terms of being able to play a full 82 games. But in terms of how good this Florida Panthers club is, that he anchors, I feel, in my opinion, that he deserves to be on our list. He comes in at 8 for me. Why don't you take us to break, and we'll spit out the rest of our list and, of course, complete it on tomorrow's episode.
Number 7 and number 6 coming at you hot after the break. And, of course, stay tuned in for tomorrow's episode for our top 5 centermen. And, of course, later in the week, we'll break down our top 10 left wingers. That will be a very fun episode as well. So make sure you're staying tuned all week long for everything you need to know. Fantasy hockey season and the National Hockey regular season right around the corner. Everything you need to know coming up after the break. But this episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel on this podcast, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you now through September 22nd. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Flip, I don't know if you've been keeping up with all the football that's been going on NFL-wise. FanDuel, I've been betting strongly there. And again, part of this deal with that YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and current form of payment, and you can cancel it anytime you like. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. And once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Flip, and I appreciate all the love and support you guys have been showing us out there for the podcast over the summer and all season long. So thank you so much for that. Before I get to my number 7 centerman on this list, I do just want to make a quick little comment on Aleksander Barkov. I will say I did notice a little bit of a trend with this player. Every 3 years, he seems to have a little bit of a bounce back from the year prior. I mean, I look back at the, you start from 2016, 52 points, 78 points, and then he goes to 96 points. Then he dips down a little bit. Obviously, the COVID season and injuries. So he goes down to 62 to 58, then to 88. Then he goes down to 78, 80 points. Maybe this is a trend from this player. Every 3 years, you can expect a little bit of an offensive boost from that. But that's what I just saw. Maybe I'm reading into it a little bit much. But
no, I like it. I like
7, At number 7, I've got Jack Hughes. And I remember, again, Jack Hughes for me, I know there was a lot of debate, you, me, Blake on this podcast, that debate between JT Miller. Look, I said it was like splitting hairs. These are both very strong players in the fantasy hockey realm. Obviously, two different styles of game. But for me, I value the peripheral categories that JT Miller brings to the game. And even with the limited amount of games that Jack Hughes played last year, 62 games played, he still had 74 points. He's been a point-per-game player over the last 3 seasons. Hasn't been able to stay healthy, obviously. But even with that said, he still finished as the 14th best player in our league, Flip. So he makes the top 10. He's the 7th best for me. 74 points last year. Even in the 62 games, he had 31 power play points, 274 shots. What can he do in a full 82 games? It's absolutely incredible what he can do. This New Jersey Devils team is looking absolutely deadly with what they bring in on the back end of things. Jacob Markstrom, Brett Pesce, everyone else they added as well. Dougie Hamilton back in the mix.
Brendan Dillon.
I know Luke Hughes will be out for the first 4 to 6 weeks of the beginning of the season.
That sucks for sure.
It sucks for sure. This is a very strong team in the Metropolitan Division. We're going to talk about our predictions for each division coming up soon as well. They're going to be very high up there. Jack Hughes, number 7 on my list.
Here we go, baby. Serendipitous, number 7 on my list as well, Jack Hughes. And look, you hit the nail on the head when you said it like this. What can he do with a full 82 games and him at the top of his game? To me, he can be a top 5, 6, 7 point getter in the NHL. And now, when you have a team, Steele, that, no disrespect to the Nico Dazes, Akira Schmids, Vitek Vanaceks of the world, you got Jacob Markstrom, and now you got Jake Allen holding it down. That is a solid duo that if they do what we think they can do, and then you bring in the big bodies of Brendan Dillon and Brett Pesce, 2 guys that don't actually care at all about whether they show up on the offensive stat sheet. They want to crunch heads and block shots. So combine that with Simon Nemec, Dougie Hamilton fully healthy. You and I have been saying this for months now, and I know it's caught a little bit of traction on some bigger pods, but we've been saying this for months. Luke Hughes, that hurts. But what's playing into Jack Hughes this season, it's massive. And I'm here very much so for him at the 7th spot, Steele. But who I'm even more excited about, and I'll just go right into it and toss it back to you because we're running out of time. Braden Point with Jake Gensel on his wing, along with Nikita Kucherov coming into this season, Steele, with a healthy Vasilevsky. I know they don't have Sergachev there anymore, and more pressures on Victor Hedman. That might be the best top line in hockey. And yeah, we can have a conversation about a whole bunch of them. And I'm not saying it is, but it's close. And I'm very excited at what that means for a player in Braden Point who drives the play. And now he's got two guys on the wing, not like Steven Stamkos couldn't, but even more dangerous. I'm loving Braden Point here at the number 6 spot. This is me driving very deep into the value of this player this year, Steele, but I like Braden Point at number 6, and I like that we had the same player at number 7, and I'm hyped for top 5 on tomorrow's episode.
Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely insane, and I'm trying to find this graphic I saw the other day because it goes very well with who I'm about to talk about, but I might have to mention it on tomorrow's episode if I'm able to find it.
I like it.
For me, number 6 on the list, Sidney Crosby. Number 6 on the list. Maybe he's higher. He has to be higher because he's on your list.
He's higher.
He's higher. But
not by much. Not by much.
Yeah, not by much, but he's there. Number 6 for me, Sidney Crosby. He does sign that new deal with the Pittsburgh Penguins, 2 years, $8.7 million. He loves the $8.7 million, and he said it himself the best. He does what he can to provide the best opportunity for the team to succeed. And that's what he's doing with this. He could have gotten a lot more money because he's one of the best hockey players we've ever seen in our life. But Sidney Crosby, if you would have told me that Crosby wouldn't have missed a single game over the last 2 seasons, if you would have told me that Crosby scored 42 goals last year and 33 the year prior with back-to-back 90-plus points, I wouldn't have believed you. I wouldn't have believed you because he's had so many injury concerns. The team has been regressing over the last years. They've missed the playoffs over the last few seasons as well. Sidney Crosby has gotten it done himself. I mean, he's had some help from Malkin, maybe Chris Letang on the back end. Tristan Jarry struggled, but offensively, he's been doing it himself. And look what he's working with this season. Ricard Raquel, Brian Rust, Michael Bunting. They now do get the Rutger McGroarty fella who's playing in the top 6, which is intriguing to me. But even then, he just makes everybody he plays with better. Doesn't matter who's on his right side, who's on his left side. He just elevates their game. He asks for it. He demands it from them. And that's what makes him such a strong centerman, even at the age of, what is he? 37 years old. If you again, an $8.7 million deal for a 37-year-old, only Sidney Crosby can do that right now. Sidney Crosby, number 6 on the list. I don't know projection-wise where I see him ending with this season because of what he's working with. But again, if anyone can get to 90-plus points again at 37, 38 years old, it's Sidney Crosby. The volume of shots has increased over the last 3 seasons. He had 278 shots last year. 15.1 shooting percentage, 101 hits. I said it before. At 37 years old, he's never once in his career hit over 100-plus hits, but he did it last season. So for me, number 6, he could be higher on the list, but there's some younger fellows, some guys who fill out those peripherals who just make it into the top 5.
I'm going to save my ode for Mr. Crosby. Sid the Squid, Sid the Kid, Captain Canada, Captain Clutch, number 87. I'll save my ode to him at the number 5 position, Steele, on tomorrow's episode. And you know how I feel about that player. Let's keep it tight on today's episode. 5 through 1, baby, and I'll start my list with a proper ode to number 87. Not like yours was not, Steele, but you know how much I love this player, fantasy bets and otherwise. I'll kick that off on Thursday's episode. Take it away, my friend, and I'm ready to get it going with our listener leagues once again. Shout out to everyone who's been interested as well.
Shout out. We've had so many people reach out, so thank you so much for all the interest. We're putting you on the list. Again, everything will be finalized by September 20th. Expect an email if you've been, the draw will happen. Expect an email on September 20th or the morning of September 21st, but that will all be said and done by the end of the week. Real quick, before we wrap things up, I did find the graphic. This is the graphic I found. Some athletes with 3+ championships and multiple MVPs before 30. Sidney Crosby, Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky, and Patrick Mahomes. Sid is one of the great athletes ever. He's in the mix right there. It's not bad, but I had that, so I just wanted to mention it before we wrap things up. Once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Again, make sure you go enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link in the description below. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. And again, from both Flip and I, we wish you good luck with all of your bets this fall. And we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.